Say something to a stranger in Reykjavik. Say it in a village in the Ecuadorian Amazon. Say it in a farmhouse in rural China, and mishear them when they answer. Watch what happens. In all three places, separated by oceans and thousands of years of history, that stranger will make almost exactly the same tiny sound. A short, rising grunt. You already know it. You make it a dozen times a day without thinking. It's the sound you make when you didn't quite catch what someone said. Huh? It seems too stupid to be important. It's barely a word. It's the noise you make when your brain stalls. But that little syllable might be the only truly universal word on Earth. The one piece of language that every human being alive shares with every other. Now, most people assume there's no such thing. Ask anyone if there's a single word that all languages have in common, and they'll tell you it's impossible. Languages are too different. The word for water in English, agua in Spanish, mizu in Japanese, maji in Swahili. There's no overlap. Languages drift apart over centuries until they share nothing at all. So the obvious answer is no. There is no universal word. And the second most common guess is mama. It feels right. Babies all over the world babble something like mama. And in language after language, the word for mother sounds similar. But that's not really a shared word. That's just the easiest sound a baby can make with its mouth. A soft M with an open vowel, and parents everywhere decided it must mean them. It's biology leaking into language. It doesn't count as a word every culture agreed on. So both obvious answers are wrong. And the real answer is far stranger, because there is a universal word. It just isn't a noble one. It's the dumbest sound you make. In 2013, 3 researchers at the Max Planck Institute for Psycholinguistics in the Netherlands, Mark Dingemans, Francisco Terrera, and Nick Enfield, set out to test something almost no one had bothered to study. They wanted to know what people actually say when a conversation breaks down. Not the polished words in a dictionary, but the messy little sounds we use to keep a conversation from falling apart. They gathered recordings of real, natural, spontaneous conversation from all over the world. Not scripted sentences, real people talking in their own homes and villages. They studied 10 languages from 5 continents, including some that have no historical relationship to each other whatsoever. Languages like Chapala from Ecuador, Siwu from Ghana, Lao from Southeast Asia, Icelandic, Dutch, Mandarin Chinese, and an Aboriginal Australian language called Marini Patha. These languages are about as unrelated as languages can possibly be. They evolved on opposite ends of the planet, in cultures that never touched. If you wanted to prove that 2 things developed completely independently, you couldn't pick a better set. And in every single one of them, they found the same word. A short syllable used in the same exact situation, with the same exact meaning. When one person didn't catch what the other said, they made a sound that, written out, looks like, huh? In Chapala, it was ah. In Siwu, in Mandarin, ah. In Dutch, hey. Tiny variations, but all of them landed in the same narrow zone. A single, short vowel, often with an H in front, said with a rising, questioning tone. The researchers published their findings in the journal PLOS ONE, and in 2015 they won an Ig Nobel Prize for it, the award given for research that first makes you laugh, then makes you think. Because once you actually think about it, this is genuinely bizarre. Here's why. Words don't normally match across unrelated languages. When 2 languages share a word, it's almost always because they inherited it from a common ancestor, or because one borrowed it from the other. Father in English, padre in Spanish, pitar in ancient Sanskrit. Those match because they all descend from one ancient parent language spoken thousands of years ago. That's inheritance, but can't be explained that way. Chapala and Icelandic don't share an ancestor. There was no ancient tribe that handed this word down to both. They had no contact, no trade routes, no shared history. And yet they arrived at the same sound for the same job. That shouldn't happen by chance. The odds of dozens of unrelated languages randomly landing on the same syllable for the same meaning are almost 0. So what's going on? And here's where it gets strange. The researchers argued that wasn't inherited at all. It was convergently evolved. That's a term from biology. Convergent evolution is when 2 completely unrelated creatures develop the same solution because they're facing the same problem. Sharks and dolphins look alike with the same sleek body and fins, but a shark is a fish and a dolphin is a mammal. They're not related. The ocean just forced both of them into the same shape because that's the shape that works underwater. eyes evolved independently dozens of separate times across the animal kingdom because seeing light is so useful that nature keeps reinventing it. And the claim here is that huh is the linguistic version of the same thing. Every language on Earth, no matter where, faces the identical problem. Conversation is fragile. We talk fast, we mumble, a truck drives by, someone coughs, and suddenly you've missed what the other person said, and you need to fix it instantly before the conversation moves on without you. Linguists call this repair. It's the machinery we use to patch a broken moment in a conversation, and the perfect repair signal has very specific demands. It has to be fast, because you have a fraction of a second to jump in before the other person keeps talking. It has to be short, sayable in a single breath with the least possible effort. It has to be easy for a panicking, confused brain to produce instantly. And it has to clearly sound like a question, so the other person knows to repeat themselves. Run those requirements through every language on Earth, and you get squeezed toward the same answer. You can't use a long word, that's too slow. You need a quick, neutral vowel, the kind your mouth makes when it's barely doing anything. You give it a rising tone so it reads as a question, and you keep it minimal. Sand any language down against those constraints for long enough, and it polishes that repair signal into nearly the same shape. A short, rising, huh? That's why it's the same everywhere. Not because we all inherited it, but because every human conversation independently demanded it and arrived at the same solution. But that's only half the story, because the researchers noticed something else, something that proved huh really is a word and not just an instinctive grunt of surprise. If huh were just a reflex, like a yelp or a gasp, it would sound identical in every language, the way a sneeze does. But it doesn't. It bends to fit each language. In languages where questions normally rise in pitch, huh rises. In languages with different sound systems, the vowel shifts slightly to match the local sounds. It obeys the grammar of the language it lives in. It's learned. Children have to acquire it the same way they acquire every other word. It just happens to be shaped by such universal pressure that it ends up looking the same everywhere. That's the part that makes it special. A sneeze is biology. Huh is language. It's a real word with real rules that just so happens to be the one word the entire human species independently agreed on. Think about what that actually means. There are roughly 7,000 languages spoken on Earth right now. They disagree about almost everything. They disagree about how to count, how to name colors, whether a bridge is masculine or feminine, even which direction the pass is in. Humans have built thousands of separate systems for describing reality, and almost none of them line up. But underneath all of it, there's one thread connecting every person who has ever spoken. A tiny, unglamorous sound that means the same thing in every mouth on the planet. I'm here. I'm listening. I missed it. Say it again. So the next time you're talking to someone and you lose the thread and that little grunt slips out before you can stop it, remember what you just did. You reach for the one word that every human being who has ever lived would understand. The smallest word we have, and maybe the most human one.